Welcome, and in this section we're going to be going over Chapter 24, Section 3, which is Early Capitalist Society. And so to continue your notes, you're going to add notes to your SPICE chart, and today's focus is going to be on economics and interaction with the environment. There will also be some social elements, so look out for those to add to your social notes. So looking at early capitalist society, we're going to be learning about the economic system that emerges in the early modern era, known as capitalism. This is an early form of capitalism. We'll study this a little bit more in depth when we get to the Industrial Revolution, and that's more like Chapter 30. So for now, let's focus on this goal, which is to explain the factors that led states in Europe to develop a strong economy and how the economic changes transformed European societies. So we're going to be looking at what were the different things that contributed to their strong economy. So listen out for some of those factors, take the notes, and then just understand why. Okay? So to give you an overview of the section, trade and colonization in the Americas is going to fuel growth in Western Europe. There's going to be technologies of communication and transportation that are going to enable businesses to profit from distant markets like those in Asia and in the Americas. Capitalism is going to generate wealth, but it's not going to be evenly distributed. It's not going to generate it evenly, and it's going to encourage social changes. And then I chose this picture here. This shows a merchant in his office, and this is a painting. A merchant would have hired somebody to paint, and he wants to show the world that he is literate, so he has books, a book by his desk, and he also wants to show he's worldly, and he shows his receipts, right? The clothes he's wearing shows off his wealth. So this is, just the existence of this picture shows you how a merchant is able to acquire money and hire somebody to paint him. In the Middle Ages, most portraits were religious or of rulers, and so now we're seeing other people kind of benefit from this art, and that's one of the significance of this particular piece of art and how it represents that time period. So looking then at what leads to these economic growths, and one of those the main one is the American crops. The Columbian Exchange introduces new food to Europe that's going to improve their diet. It's going to improve their caloric intake, and all of that's going to improve their health. It's going to lead to less mortality because people are going to be more resistant to diseases and have stronger immune systems to survive illnesses. So the most significant crop was the introduction of the potato because it was an important source of carbohydrate for peasants and for laborers who were having trouble keeping up with the rising prices of bread. So the potato is going to be important, especially in cold areas like in Ireland, in Scandinavia, in Russia. Remember, the potato grows high in the Andes where it's cold. So land in Northern Europe that's cold and traditionally did not have a lot that can grow there can now grow this high carbohydrate, very nutrient food with a potato. And then corn was also introduced, but it was mostly used for animal feed. But even then, you're growing corn so that your animals get bigger and you're increasing your meat diet. And then other foods like tomatoes and peppers just give more flavor to the food. And all of these are going to contribute to a growing population. So the population is going to grow because people are living longer and they're not dying of disease. They're more resistant to the diseases. Even though there were periodic outbreaks of plagues, they were not as widespread as the bubonic plague that we saw in the 1350s or the mid-1300s. So we see the population of Europe go from about 80 million in 1500 by 100 to 180 million by 1800. So it's going to grow by over 1 million people. And that's going to be because the Europeans are going to develop more better agricultural techniques. They're going to make better use of farmlands. But the cultivation of American crops is what's going to fuel that. It's going to allow for these lands to be brought under cultivation. And so with the growth of population is going to come urbanization. Europe is going to start to become urbanized in a lot of areas. So here you see the city of Paris. So cities, especially cities along trade routes, along rivers, are going to grow. Cities like London and Amsterdam in the Netherlands are going to become very important cities. Paris, Copenhagen in Denmark are going to become major cities. So they're still not as big as like the cities of China or some of the cities in India, but now we're seeing them rise from populations of 100,000, 60,000 to about 500,000 people in places like Paris and in London. So these cities are going to be important government centers. A lot of kings are going to move their monarchies here. That's where the royal palaces are going to be, major religious institutions. So here we see London. And just a quick note here, that middle picture you could see carving on the wall, that's actually graffiti of prisoners that were held in the Tower. Wealthy nobles would often inscribe their family crest on the prison walls. This is the city of Amsterdam, and you can see the houses that are built in Amsterdam. Very narrow, but at the very top, if you notice by that very top window, there's a little ledge above the window that holds a hook. So these were merchant homes, and that hook at the top is a pulley, and what they would do is the very top floor would be their warehouse, and that's where they would store their goods. They would bring in goods, they would store them until the price was right to sell them, and then they would have their markets usually on the bottom floor, and they would live in the middle floors. So cities like Amsterdam today were built during this period of urbanization. In the museums of Amsterdam, you could see these tiles that take this Chinese art form on porcelain, but now they're applied to the trade that you're seeing in the Netherlands and the ships of the Dutch East India Company. And if you visit museums in Amsterdam, you'll see, there's a museum and has a section dedicated to the types of ships, right, that were navigating at this time going into the Americas. You can see the cannon there on the side, going into the Indian Ocean. A lot of the artwork was artwork that was generated during this period of increasing wealth and urbanization and the growth of Amsterdam. Lots of products that you can see products that came from Asia and from the Islamic world, like the porcelain wares, and paintings showing the ports that they built, right? Europeans were building ports. This is a port from the Dutch East India Company that was built in Batavia. You could see the amount, the money that they're using to paint and to invest in artwork, and the type of art showing some of the luxury goods, some of these vessels that were made, right? This is all ways of showing your wealth. In Copenhagen, there was a time where the Danish Navy was one of the dominant navies on the North Sea. Copenhagen became an important port for trade. So all of these cities, all of this, are benefiting from the incoming wealth that's coming from overseas colonies and from the American crops. Now, another thing you want to be able to do is to be able to support a claim about capitalism with historical evidence. So you got to be able to understand capitalism. So early capitalism is an economic system. And in this economic system, private parties, which means like people like you and me, anyone who's just not part of the government, right, or not part of the church, is a private party. So private parties make goods and services for a free market for people to buy. They take advantage of market conditions to make a profit. It's a system that's based on the private ownership of land, machinery, tools, buildings, raw materials, etc. And that's called capital. That's where the word capitalism comes from, right? Workers are treated as a factor of production. Supply and demand control wages and prices. But it's the private entities that determine what's going to produce, or what's going to be produced, how much it's going to be produced for, where it's going to be sold. Government doesn't make those decisions. People decide for themselves what to produce, and it's the job of the businessman, not of the government. And so if a business person organizes their affairs efficiently, and they're going to get a lot of profit. If they don't, they can go broke. So it's up to them, right? And it's their decision and how they handle it. So European merchants are going to transform Europe through this way, the way no one else had done before, because they learned to take advantage of the market conditions to build, this efficient network of transportation and communication, and it's built on supply and demand, right? They learn to, for example, hold the crop for sale and not sell it right away, but wait for people to really need the food and then sell it at a higher price. One famous event was in the 1630s, the tulip mania, where tulips were selling at a high price. So then people started projecting that in the future, tulips would be worth more. So people start buying in advance next year's tulip crops, and tulips were being brought in from the Indian Ocean. And as tulips were being introduced to the Netherlands, there was this craze because people were buying them thinking, I'll buy them, and then when they get there, I'll sell them for more money. Right? So people started to predict, and so this is called the futures market, and this is kind of what the stock market is. This is what we have today, futures markets, where we're betting that something's going to be worth more in the future, so we're buying access to that corn or that tomato or that coffee in the future. So these things are based on supply and demand. So capitalism also has its downsides because it also leads to the taking advantage of people. And the example I gave in your book is how the merchants in Amsterdam, when they learned about famine in the Mediterranean, they would transport and sell their grain out there that they purchased cheaply from the Baltic lands in Poland and Russia. So they take advantage of people, but then at the same time, they're providing food when not a lot of people have them. And that's something that you're going to learn, that with capitalism, it's going to benefit some people, but because other people aren't benefiting. And out of this comes the joint stock companies that we talked about in the previous chapter. So I'm not going to spend too much time explaining what joint stock companies are, but just know that this was an important institution to early capitalism. And the trading companies like the Dutch East India Company, like the British East India Company, were ways to expand your business. And they took advantage of these extensive communication and transportation networks and of large-scale investors so that they could send these large, go on these large expeditions, built these large ships, established trading ports. Here you see a shipyard in Amsterdam as they're building these ships that are going to bring back lots and lots of cargo, but they're going to be very inexpensive to build and operate. So it's also happening, these stock companies are being supported by governments, right? So the English and the Dutch, the reason why we had the English East India Company and the Dutch East India Company is because those were governments where merchants were very influential. And so they're going to pass laws that are going to enforce contracts, that are going to protect financial interests. They're going to settle disputes between business transactions and parties. So they're going to charter these stock companies because they're also going to benefit by collecting taxes from them. So it's in the interest of the government as well. And they're going to give these governments, these companies, permission to build forts. Merchants also organized production into what's called the putting out system. This is before the use of factories. And the way the putting out system is they would go to the rural areas and they would hire individual people because they could work for a lot less. People who live out in the country on rural estates, they have a much lower cost of living, so their wages are not as high. So the merchant would buy the wool from a sheep farmer, take it to a spinner, pay someone to spin it into yarn, take the yarn to a weaver, pay that weaver to weave it into cloth, take that cloth to the seamstress, have the seamstress make the clothing, and then they would sell the clothing in the city, right, at a high price, because everyone else in the process is getting paid very little, but then the merchant sells it in the cities at a high price. And that's called the putting out system or the cottage industry. And this allows, for example, you see in this picture, you see women working. You have in the cottage industry a lot of women who are able to make a living for themselves, working as seamstresses, working as spinners in the cottage industry. So that's going to create some women having their own money. And some people say that that's probably another reason why there was witch hunts, right? Because of this women wanting to become a little bit more independent. But capitalism also, has its downsides because the only way that these profits are able to be generated is if there is also a cheap source of food. And so serfdom in Poland and in Russia are going to be what are going to be supporting this growth of Western Europe. So in Eastern Europe, it's not as advanced. Okay, the czars restricted the freedoms of most of the Russian peasants and tied them to the lands because these serfs were growing the food that was being traded to Western Europe. So it was benefiting the landowners of Russia, it was benefiting the czars of Russia, but it wasn't benefiting the majority of the people who were peasants, right? So in Russia, while serfdom had kind of gone away in Western Europe, in Russia, rulers were tightening their grip and having even more restrictions on the movement of peasants to make sure that there was going to be laborers to work on estates. And so these conditions turned them almost into slaves. It wasn't quite slavery, but they were sold, even though it wasn't legal, they were sold as if they were slaves. So what made capitalism possible to flourish in the West is the suffering of peasants in the East, right? Because they're providing inexpensive food and the raw materials that are going to fuel the economic development. And so from its earliest days, that's one of the implications of capitalism, right? That it's going to affect people far away from the capitalist centers. And so while London is getting richer, while Paris is getting richer, while these cities are looking nice, while people there are becoming wealthier, somewhere else, people are being affected, right? If you think about this, this is also, and we're going to study this in the later chapter, while Europe is getting rich, it isn't just because capitalism is a system that works perfectly. They're benefiting from the fact that there's free labor producing their food in Poland and Russia, and not to mention free labor in the Americas, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. So what generates the profit that leads to capitalism becoming the leading economic system of Western Europe and then eventually in the West, like in the United States, is also the system that impoverished and enslaved a lot of people that were not in these centers. So, and even today, when you think about like what's allowed, Amazon to get really rich, what's allowed Nike to get really rich in today's world, it's the same concept. Yes, we have better products and we have them at better prices and we can afford them more, but that's because someone somewhere else that's not in this part of the world is working for very, very little, or their resources are being extracted and those lands are being devastated so that we can have the products in this land. So that's something that's still true today. And so you want to understand that because you want to be able to contrast that with the questions that come up on ethics. And Adam Smith was one of the proponents of early capitalism. And so Adam Smith was a Scottish philosopher who held that society would prosper when individuals pursued their own economic self-interest. And so what he says is that because capitalism is based on merchants acting in their own self-interest, right? Even today, why is Apple releasing an iPhone 12? Because it wants to sell more phones than Samsung, right? That competition is making them develop a better phone, a faster phone, a better camera, more storage, it can do more things. They're not developing it so that you have a better experience. They're not developing it so that you enjoy your phone experience more. That's not the motive. The motive is they want you to buy it. Now, how do you benefit? You benefit by getting a better product, right? You get something that's faster, that can do more. So you benefit, but the original intent wasn't for you to benefit. The original intent is make as much money as possible. And so what Adam Smith is talking about then is that by people pursuing their own interests, they're going to make better products. They're going to make, more efficient technologies, and we're going to benefit from that, or you're going to benefit from that. You're going to buy it. You're going to generate a sale. You're going to generate a tax. It's going to lead to the hiring of workers that need to make the product, right? So he was a proponent of this system. And then the opponents of the capitalist system argued that, well, not everyone, the people who don't have any rights are usually the ones that are going to be taking advantage of the most. And we're going to study that opposition system a little bit more when we get to the Industrial Revolution, because that's when it really begins to become more noticeable. And so what you're going to have for this chapter is you're going to have a writing practice, and this is an SAQ. So you take a little section, there's a section in your book, right, that is given to you as an excerpt. And what you want to do is explain one piece of historical evidence that would support Adam Smith's views of capitalism as described above, which is what I just talked about, right? So you could think of during the Industrial Revolution, one piece of evidence that would support that society prospered because people pursued their own self-interest. So think of something in this chapter that shows people benefiting from capitalism. Who benefited? Where did we see growth in wealth? Right? Where did we see growth in cities or in the way people lived? And then one piece of historical evidence that would challenge his view. So where would be somewhere where people were not benefiting? That would be how you would answer part B. Okay? So that is it for this lecture, and you have one more to get through.